Welcome back, everyone. James Gunn has been talking about the new Superman in his Superman Legacy movie, the new version of the Justice League, along with the rest of the major characters in that Superman Legacy movie like Lex Luthor, Lois Lane, so we'll break it all down, because we finally know about some of the cast. I'll explain what's going to happen with Henry Cavill's Superman, Ben Affleck's Batman, the rest of the previous Justice League, because some of those Snyderverse actors say that they're coming back, and some of them, like Henry Cavill, for instance, say that they will come back eventually, just not right away. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. The Flash movie is coming really soon. I'm working on a bunch of videos for that right now, and I'll do a movie ticket giveaway when we get a little bit closer. Right now, they're actually planning on using the Flashpoint twist in the Flash movie to soft reboot the DCEU Snyderverse into James Gunn's new DC Phase 1 of movies, which he's calling DC Chapter 1. He's like the new Kevin Feige of DC movies, but he's not copying the phase terminology, but that's basically what they are. It's basically DC Phase 1. The title of that DC Chapter 1 is Gods and Monsters, which is a reference to a couple things I'll explain later in the video. The report comes from The Hollywood Reporter, and they're saying that Nicholas Hoult is the new version of Lex Luthor, which gives you an idea for where they're plotting this out. Like, this is meant to be a 20-something Superman, like Year 2 Superman, kind of like the way that Robert Pattinson's Batman was Year 2 Batman. So all the major characters are either in their 20s, or if they're like Perry White or the Kents, they're just like a little bit older. Lex Luthor obviously a little bit older than Superman, so Nicholas Hoult a little bit older, but still very young. Jesse Eisenberg's version of Lex Luthor also very young. They didn't say whether they'll develop the character the original way, like if he's bald from the start, or if it'll be like a Zack Snyder, Jesse Eisenberg, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman kind of thing, where he becomes bald during the course of the new movies. But because he is Lex Luthor, he will be one of the biggest antagonists across the entire universe, not just in the new Superman movies. Probably the biggest thing in this report is that the current lead for Superman right now is actually David Cornsweet, who a lot of people have been fan casting when the reboot was announced last year. Some of you probably been expecting him for a while. James Gunn had previously revealed that the person that would be his new Superman wouldn't be any of the typical really big established actors people would normally expect for a role like this. That just means that he had always planned on casting a smaller actor like a relative unknown that hadn't done a ton of major comic book roles before. David's biggest stuff so far is probably that new Pearl horror movie, which is pretty decent, the Politician series, and David Simon's We Own This City, which also starred Jon Bernthal, Punisher, pretty decent series. So he's done some decent stuff so far. I'm not super familiar with his work or the actor himself, but I do like the idea that James Gunn is casting a relative unknown, just because when you cast an established actor, they bring all these preconceived notions about what their Superman is going to be like, and all these ideas about how the character is going to be. Probably the best example of that recently is when The Rock played Black Adam. He didn't so much play Black Adam as much as he played The Rock in a Black Adam costume. In the way all of The Rock's roles tend to feel the same, he plays the same character in most of his movies, as opposed to a character actor who feels completely different in every role they play, like Colin Farrell's Penguin in the new Batman movies. His Penguin felt so different from his other roles, tonally and just physically, visibly, that most people, when the first looks and the teaser started releasing, didn't realize it was actually Colin Farrell. Talk about disappearing into a role. So it just feels like a smart move for James Gunn to cast a relative unknown, and it'll be much easier for him to mold his new Superman performance into the actual story so that the story and the character fit a little bit better. The new leading pick for Lois Lane is actually Rachel Brosnahan from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is actually a pretty decent series. Like, she's actually a great actress, but a lot of people are expecting it to be someone else just because the Lois Lane character will be in her 20s during the movie. Like, she'll be about the same age as Superman. Most of the versions of the characters will be much younger, and Rachel Brosnahan is on the older side of that. She's in her 30s. Honestly, I don't think it's that big of a problem. Like, if she's a better actress, I would rather see her play the character. Really good example of this, like a slightly older Lois Lane, is Amy Adams' Lois Lane in Man of Steel. If they were going to do Man of Steel 2, she obviously would have been a much older version of Lois Lane, even though Henry Cavill still looks pretty young. Honestly, with just like a little bit of makeup, she still seems relatively young, so it wouldn't have been that big a deal. James Gunn did say that some of his Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy actors will play characters in the upcoming DC movies and in the Superman Legacy movie, but he didn't say which Guardians of the Galaxy character would be in his Superman Legacy movie. But if you think about it, some of his Guardians of the Galaxy actors have already been in DC movies, some of them relatively recently, like Michael Rooker, Michael Rosenbaum, his brother Sean Gunn played Weasel, even his Amanda Waller, who will continue in these new DC movies. But I think when he said that, he was mostly referring to new actors from Guardians of the Galaxy that have not been in DC movies before, like Chris Pratt or Zoe Saldana. And I think Chris Pratt would actually make a pretty decent Booster Gold. Explaining what the gods and monsters terminology means for Phase 1, the gods part is a reference to characters like Superman, like superpowered beings who are basically living gods, other cosmic beings with crazy levels of power like Darkseid. In the monsters part is a reference to a couple different things, like the idea that humanity views these gods as kind of like monsters. It's also a reference to actual monster creature-based characters, like one of James Gunn's very first DC movies and series they're going to release in the next couple years is the Creature Commandos. They're literally a team made of monster-based characters.
The first project is Creature Commandos. Creature Commandos is an animated series. I've written all the episodes. Something we're going to do that's a little bit different at DC is we're going to have characters move into animation, out of animation, usually having the same actor play their voice as who plays them in live action.
But also the monsters term is a reference to the actual villains, like the regular human villains like Lex Luthor, who act like monsters. Even though they view the gods in this equation, like Superman, as monsters, they themselves, the regular humans, are acting like monsters metaphorically.
My name is Ezra Miller, and I am criminally excited to be a part of the Justice League.
Really good example of this is the Justice League Gods and Monsters movie they released a couple years ago. It's about an alternate universe Justice League where Zod's son becomes Superman, Man-Bat becomes a version of Batman, and Wonder Woman is the daughter of Orion, one of the new gods, like a way more hardcore version of the character. The people of their world view them as kind of like monsters because like Man-Bat, for instance, is literally a monster-based character. But the real villain winds up being Will Magnus in the Metal Men, like a human of Earth who does villainous, monstrous things. And the Justice League, which they had viewed as monsters, wind up saving everyone, proven to be good. So the people wind up being the real monsters. It just sounds like that's going to be the vibe in this new Justice League universe that James Gunn is rebooting. The rest of the regular people, like Amanda Waller, think of the new Justice League the same way that Zack Snyder's Lex Luthor thought of Henry Cavill's Superman, kind of like a monster. The whole deal with Lex Luthor, and this is the same for every different TV show, every comic book, every medium that you've seen them in, with a few exceptions, like there have been a couple Elseworlds versions of Lex Luthor who wind up being really good. But in most versions of the character, like even Michael Rosenbaum's version of Lex during Smallville, the reason why they don't like Superman is because they feel like when Superman showed up, the world stopped dealing with its own problems and depending on him to save them from everything, so it made humanity weaker. So like every version of Lex Luthor, for the most part, thinks of himself as the greatest humanitarian. It's just that the lengths he goes to, the evil, the terrible things that he does to try and get rid of Superman and cause the world to turn against him, wind up driving him to overt villainy. During the Justice League Snyder Cut, when Zack Snyder was still planning on making Justice League 2 and Justice League 3, they revealed the story for that. He was actually going to get into that during his movies, where Lex Luthor in his Injustice League wind up working with Darkseid to get rid of the Justice League, at least for a little while, until the Justice League eventually prevails. Zack Snyder revealed a bunch more deleted scenes about his Justice League trilogy. I did a video about that, so I'll link it below in the description. The reason Henry Cavill isn't going to be Superman in Superman Legacy is mostly because he is meant to be a much, much younger version of the character. When they made the initial announcement about the reboot, Henry Cavill did say that he was sad to leave the role of Superman, at least temporarily, but that he had talked to James Gunn about returning in the future, like the distant future. I think what he's talking about is an Elseworlds Crisis on Infinite Earths kind of twist. Because the whole idea is that all these new movies like Superman Legacy, Batman Brave and the Bold that James Gunn is doing, those will be the versions that you see in the new version of the Justice League. So when Henry Cavill is saying that he'll eventually come back way down the road, it would have to be an Elseworlds kind of twist, probably. I mean, they could recast him as another role like a version of Jor-El, but I think when he was talking about coming back, he was talking about coming back as a version of his Superman.
I wanted to wait until the weekend was over before posting this, so there's a lot to be thankful for. And I'll get to that in time, but I want to thank you guys most of all. Thank you for your support and thank you for your patience. I promise it will be rewarded.
It does suck to see him go. I would have loved to see Man of Steel 2. I've done a couple videos about what that movie would have been. They've been a lot of plans, made some announcements about what their plot was going to be. Even though he's also leaving The Witcher, he just announced the brand new Warhammer series, released a trailer for that. I just did a video for that, so I'll link it at the end of this. But there's a bunch of new Flash trailers with a ton of new footage, so I'll do videos for those as quickly as possible. There'll be a bunch of Blue Beetle trailers really soon. Everyone post all your reactions in the comments below if you have any questions about what's going on, and click here for that brand new Henry Cavill Warhammer trailer video, and click here for all my new Flash trailer videos and Easter eggs. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.